I got the call just after lunch. I was in the middle of reviewing a property contract when my phone buzzed with my mom's number. I answered, expecting to hear her cheerful voice rambling about her tomato plants or asking how to use the TV remote for the 1000th time. Instead, it was her neighbor, Mr. Dorsey, talking fast and panicked. "Peter," he said, "your mom's outside. Locked out. She's been sitting on the front steps for an hour. HOA changed the locks." I stood up so fast my chair slammed into the wall. "They what?" "Some woman from the board, Tricia or Tina something, came by this morning. Said your mom was in violation of some landscaping regulation. Next thing we know, they've got a locksmith there. Your mom tried to ask questions but they ignored her. She didn't have her phone when they made her leave the house. I didn't even hang up. I was already grabbing my keys and out the door before Mr. Dorsey could finish. My mom, Carmen, is 78 and has arthritis in both knees. She's the kind of person who bakes cookies for the mailman and waves at every dog that passes her driveway. She's never violated anything in her life except maybe occasionally overwatering her roses. When I pulled up to her house in the Willow Pines community, I saw her sitting on the curb, her purse clutched to her chest and a blanket around her shoulders. She looked small, defeated. She smiled when she saw me. That hurt more than anything, the way she still tried to smile through it. "Hey, Mijo," she said softly. "I think the HOA made a mistake." I walked straight up to her porch, trying the knob. Locked. Then I saw the sign taped to the door. "Notice of violation, premises secured by Willow Pines Neighborhood Association. Entry prohibited until further notice." There was a phone number underneath. I called it. Straight to voicemail. "You're telling me no one from the board stayed to explain this in person?" "They drove off after the locksmith finished," Mr. Dorsey said from across the street. He looked just as furious as I felt. "That woman Tessa something laughed when your mom asked for a reason." I helped my mom into the car and headed straight for my office downtown. Now, I'm not just some guy with a decent job. I'm the managing partner of Wexler and Grant Commercial Holdings. Real estate, property law, and HOA litigation are my bread and butter. I've spent the last 15 years untangling messes for clients, suing corrupt boards, and buying out properties when the numbers made sense. But this time, this wasn't business. This was my mom. I called my assistant, told her to hold everything until further notice, and pulled every file I had on Willow Pines. I'd looked into that neighborhood before, almost bought a few homes there for a rental portfolio, but backed out because their HOA board was a mess. Too many fines, too little transparency. Tessa Farnell. That was the name on the violation notice. I found her in the HOA's public records, president of the board for the last 5 years. She'd been sued twice by homeowners for harassment and illegal fines. Both cases settled quietly. This wasn't her first power trip. I spent the next few hours digging up everything: their bylaws, their budget reports, their recent board meeting minutes. And what I found? They were hemorrhaging money. Last year's landscaping contract cost $20,000 more than the year before. Legal fees had tripled. And yet, they were issuing record fines. It smelled rotten. I filed an emergency injunction with the county clerk to force them to allow my mom re-entry. Then I made one more call to a contact of mine in the local paper, someone who loved a good HOA scandal. By 5 p.m., the locksmith was at my mom's house unlocking the door under court order. The HOA hadn't even shown up to contest it. Cowards. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I showed up at the Willow Pines clubhouse during their open board meeting. I walked in with a leather binder under my arm and a court document in my hand. Tessa Farnell stood at the front, her arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd bitten into a lemon. She was every bit the stereotype mid-50s, tightly curled blonde hair, wearing a cardigan like it was armor, and a permanent expression of disapproval. "Mr. Wallace," she said, voice coated in fake politeness. "This is a closed meeting. Homeowners only." I smiled, showing her the title deed. "I bought a property here this morning. Unit 12. In cash. So I'm a homeowner now. And I'm here to discuss the unlawful eviction of my mother." Murmurs spread through the room. A few residents looked genuinely shocked. Others looked relieved, like someone had finally said what they'd all been thinking. "You had no right to lock her out," I continued. "No due process. No hearing. No warning. That's a violation of your own bylaws, state housing code, and several civil rights statutes. Tessa's eyes narrowed. We followed internal guidelines. Her yard was trimmed, I cut in. Perfectly within your landscaping standards. I have photos. Timestamped. You didn't like the color of her garden gnome. That's what this is really about. Gasps. Someone in the back actually left. I dropped the binder on the table with a satisfying thud. And here's the fun part, I said. I've acquired voting proxies from 37 homeowners enough to call for a special election and dissolve the current board. Effective immediately. Tessa's face turned the color of spoiled milk. You can't just walk in here and... I can, I said. And I did. She tried to rally the room, but no one backed her. Not after what she did to my mom. Not after the documents I laid out showing her financial mismanagement and the sweetheart contracts she handed to her cousin's lawn company. By the end of the meeting, the board was officially dissolved. I appointed a temporary committee and scheduled a full audit. But I still wasn't done. I handed a folder to Detective Hensley, who had been quietly watching from the back. He'd been investigating Tessa for months on unrelated fraud charges. What I gave him pushed everything over the edge: bank transfers, fake fines, and a shell account tied to HOA funds. She was arrested in the parking lot, right in front of everyone. And my mom? She got her home back, her garden gnome stayed, and the neighbors started bringing her pies and thanking her for raising such a badass son. But I wasn't in this for the praise. I was in it because no one locks my mom out of her house and walks away clean. The day after Tessa's arrest, I was back at Willow Pines, this time not to confront anyone, but to start cleaning up the wreckage she left behind. You don't just tear out the engine of a corrupt machine and expect the wheels to keep turning. The neighborhood was quiet, almost cautious, like the air before a thunderstorm. People peeked from behind curtains as I walked up to the clubhouse with a box of files and my laptop under my arm. The temporary oversight committee I'd appointed the day before, 3 residents with clean records and zero interest in political power, was waiting for me inside. Bernice, a retired school principal with a no-nonsense gaze. Malik, an HVAC technician who had lived there since his kids were born. And Lorna, a nurse who worked nights and had been fined multiple times by the board for improper curtain colors. I brought the HOA's financial ledgers, I said, placing the box on the table. What's left of them, anyway? You're not going to like what you see. Bernice flipped open the first folder and scanned the numbers. They paid a consulting firm $6,000 for a decorative lighting assessment? They never installed a single bulb, I said. And the firm doesn't exist. Registered to a P.O. box 2 towns over, owned by Tessa's nephew. Lorna leaned forward, rubbing her temple with 2 fingers. How deep does this go? Far enough that the DA's office is forming a task force, I said. But that's their lane. Ours is making sure the community doesn't fall apart while they untangle the mess. Malik shook his head slowly. You know, I always thought something was off. But every time I tried to attend a board meeting, they canceled last minute. Said the room was booked or some other excuse. They did that deliberately, I said. The meeting minutes were edited after the fact. I found original recordings tucked into the HOA's cloud storage. A lot of things never made it into the written summaries. Bernice's eyes narrowed. So we've got a neighborhood that's been run like a personal ATM. Residents fined for ridiculous things and the money siphoned off. And almost no one fought back, I added, because they were afraid of retaliation. We spent the rest of the day piecing together service contracts, calling vendors to verify services, and reviewing 3 years' worth of complaints that had been ignored or outright deleted from official records. The clubhouse's back office had a locked drawer full of unopened letters, residents appealing fines, asking for explanations, and in one case, begging the board to stop harassing her teenage son for riding his bike on the sidewalk. By late afternoon, we had enough material to hold a community forum. Not a board meeting, just a gathering, open to everyone, where people could speak without fear of being silenced or fined. We posted the notice that evening, large, bold letters taped to every mailbox post and bulletin board in the neighborhood. Community Forum. Thursday at 6 p.m. Clubhouse. No fines, no censorship, just your voice. The next day, my mom made arroz con pollo and insisted on bringing a tray to the clubhouse. She had already started rearranging her planters, acting like nothing had happened, but there was a new steel deadbolt on her front door. You really going to fix this place? She asked, handing me a container. With help, I said. And a lot of patience. She gave me a look only mothers can manage, equal parts pride and worry, and went back to humming as she watered her hydrangeas. By the time Thursday rolled around, the clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs filled quickly and people lined the walls. Some were skeptical, arms folded, eyes squinting. Others looked hopeful, like this was the first time anyone had asked what they thought. I stepped to the front, microphone in hand, and didn't bother with an opening speech. Who here's been fined in the last year? I asked. A forest of hands shot up. I'm going to read a few excerpts from the HOA's records, I said. You tell me if any of these sound familiar. I read off a few: unauthorized wind chimes, improper use of holiday decorations, overuse of porch lighting, failure to maintain acceptable lawn tone. Laughter broke out, sharp and bitter. A man near the back, in his 60s with a Vietnam veteran's cap perched on his head, stood up. They fined me $200 because my flagpole was too tall by their standards. I checked the city code wasn't even close. But when I tried to appeal, they said my appeal window had expired. 2 days before I got the notice, a woman in scrubs raised her hand. They sent me 3 different violation letters in 1 week, all for the same thing: my trash can being visible from the street. I work 12-hour shifts. Sometimes I don't make it home in time to bring it in. That's not a crime. It went on like that for nearly an hour. Story after story. People finally saying what they'd been too afraid to say before. I know this is a lot, I said when the room finally quieted. But we have a chance now. Not just to fix the damage, but to rewrite the rules so this never happens again. Bernice stood up. We're forming a review committee. Anyone who wants to volunteer, we need you. We're going line by line through the bylaws. If something doesn't serve this community, it goes. Malik added, we're also working on getting refunds for illegal fines. But it's going to take time. Be patient with us. Lorna held up a clipboard. And we need your help tracking abuses. If you've got paperwork, emails, photos, bring them. We're building a case. The crowd didn't just cheer, they surged forward. Dozens of people lining up to sign the volunteer sheet. For the first time, it felt like Willow Pines belonged to the people who actually lived there. After the forum ended and the room thinned out, a woman in her 30s approached me. She had a baby in a sling and worry in her eyes. You really think we can fix this? She asked. We already started, I said. Tessa's gone. The board is gone. You've got people who care stepping up. That's how revolutions start, quietly, with tired people who've had enough. She smiled, a small one but real. The next morning, I got an email from the city inspector's office. They'd received multiple complaints about unauthorized alterations made to common spaces, trees cut down without approval, benches removed, and drainage systems rerouted, all under Tessa's orders. The inspector's report included photos. Some of the trees were marked as protected species. Removing them came with hefty fines the HOA would now have to pay unless we could prove the actions were taken without member consent. I forwarded the report to the oversight committee and called a friend at the city council. The more we dug, the more it became clear Tessa hadn't just been corrupt, she'd been reckless. The neighborhood's liability exposure was enormous. That night, I sat with the oversight volunteers in the clubhouse, going over clauses in the CC and RS that hadn't been touched in over a decade. We flagged the ones that gave too much unilateral power to the board, especially the ones that allowed fines without clear due process. This clause lets the board seize property for unpaid dues without a court order, Bernice said, eyes wide. That's outrageous. We'll strike it, I said. We'll draft a new charter. Democratic oversight, transparent budgeting, resident voting on every major decision. Malik rubbed his hands together. Feels like we're finally taking the steering wheel back. And we were. But we weren't just steering, we were rebuilding the road. One clause at a time, one voice at a time. Willow Pines had been controlled by fear and manipulation for too long. Now it was finally waking up. And I was going to make sure it never fell asleep again. The first formal vote under the new temporary leadership happened on a rainy Monday evening, 5 days after the community forum. We met in the clubhouse again. This time, the atmosphere had shifted: less suspicion, more determination. People brought clipboards, laptops, even thermoses of coffee. Nearly every seat was filled, and the hum of quiet chatter gave the room a pulse. What once had been a chamber of intimidation was becoming a true town hall. We opened the meeting with a motion to freeze all fine collections pending review. It passed unanimously. Then came the real test, restructuring the HOA bylaws. Malik pulled out a rolled-up blueprint of the neighborhood and pinned it to the corkboard. It looked like a battle plan, and in some ways it was. "We've got 3 overlapping problems," he said, tapping the map. First, the HOA owns too much authority over private property boundaries, things like driveway widths and porch furniture. Second, there's zero financial transparency. And third, enforcement is arbitrary. I nodded. We start by stripping discretionary power from individual board members. No more executive privilege. All enforcement votes must require a supermajority and documentation supplied to the homeowner within 24 hours. A woman near the front, tall and wiry with sun-leathered hands, raised her voice. "What about restitution? Some of us paid fines that were flat-out made up. I kept records. I want that money back." "You'll get it," I said. "We're opening a claims portal. If you've got proof, we'll review it. If it checks out, we'll authorize refunds or credits." Bernice added, "And if it doesn't check out, we'll explain why. In writing. No more black hole." The crowd buzzed again, this time louder than before. This was more than talk, this was structure. Action. Legal muscle backed by community resolve. After the meeting, a man with thick glasses and a quiet demeanor approached me with a flash drive in his palm. "I used to manage the HOA's cloud storage backups," he said. "They never revoked my access. This has every internal memo, unedited meeting audio, and draft resolutions they never published." I took it without a word. No need to thank someone who just handed us a nuclear option. Back at my office, I plugged in the drive and browsed the folders. It was worse than we thought. The audio logs revealed that Tessa had held private meetings with select board members, meetings where they discussed fining problem homeowners to push them out. Entire sections of meetings had been edited before being released. The original files were damning. But what really caught my attention was a folder labeled Special Projects. Inside were documents about a proposed rezoning initiative, something that hadn't been disclosed in any meeting minutes. The HOA had been planning to lobby the city to reclassify a cluster of homes around the northern edge of the neighborhood. Why? Because a private developer had approached Tessa about buying those parcels for a commercial plaza. She'd been brokering a deal with them behind everyone's backs. The signatures were fake, the surveys non-existent. But the plan had traction. A draft agreement showed Tessa was days away from submitting the rezoning paperwork. I called Bernice and told her to meet me at the city planning office at 10 the next morning. The next day, we sat across from the zoning supervisor, a man named Calder with a mustache that looked like it belonged in a Western film. "You're saying this HOA tried to rezone residential land for commercial use without notifying the homeowners?" he asked, flipping through the printed documents. "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied. "And they forged approval documents to do it." Calder leaned back and blew out a breath. "I'll issue an immediate hold on any pending rezoning requests from Willow Pines. If even half of this is real, someone's going to prison." "Already working on that," I said. Back in the neighborhood, I met with the temporary committee to go over what we'd found. Lorna, who'd been quiet until then, spoke up. "There's a different kind of damage here," she said. "People don't trust anyone in charge anymore. Even us. We need to do something public. Not just meetings. Something physical." She was right. So we organized the first neighborhood workday in years. No agenda, no speeches. Just a Saturday where everyone could come out, pull weeds, patch sidewalks, and repaint the playground fence that had been rusting for over a decade. More than 100 residents showed up. Kids painted murals on the clubhouse wall. A local food truck parked at the curb and gave out free tacos. Someone brought a portable speaker and played old vinyl jazz records. The energy was different. Not flashy, just real. I was resacking a pile of paving stones when a man I hadn't seen before approached me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a cautious look in his eye. "You're the guy who took down the board," he said. "That's one way to put it." "I'm Victor," he said. "I've got a lawsuit pending against the HOA. They tried to foreclose on my house over unpaid dues. Thing is, I paid them. I've got receipts. They just never marked it down." "They did that to more than one person," I said. "You still have the documentation?" "In a fireproof box under my stairs." "Bring it to me Monday," I said. I think we've got a larger case than we thought. He nodded once and walked off to help a kid hammer a new plank into a park bench. That night, I met with a contact at the state attorney general's office. I laid out everything: the fake fines, the forged documents, the planned rezoning, and the financial misappropriation. We're already reviewing your injunction filing, she said. But if you've got more evidence, we'll open a formal investigation into systemic HOA abuse. I've been waiting for a case like this. The next morning, I got a call from the city clerk's office. Someone had tried to file new board member paperwork under the old HOA charter. They listed themselves as interim president, the clerk said. Claimed the previous board had been illegally removed. Name? I asked. Jeremy Farnell. Tessa's brother. I drove straight to the clubhouse and found Jeremy standing in the parking lot, clipboard in hand, trying to collect signatures from confused residents. You're not on the deed at any property in this neighborhood, I said as I walked up. You're not a homeowner. You don't get to run anything here. He turned slowly. I have power of attorney for Tessa. That expired when she was arrested for fraud in the course of her duties. You want to test that in court? Be my guest. You think you're some kind of hero? You think you can just bulldoze your way through a system? I don't need to bulldoze anything, I said. I just follow the law. That's what terrifies people like you. He left without another word. But the damage he tried to cause lit a fire under us. We finalized the new bylaws that week, posted them publicly, and scheduled a ratification vote. Every homeowner would get one ballot, and every vote would be counted in public. The day of the vote, the clubhouse was packed again. We set up booths, brought in a notary, and live-streamed the count. By sundown, the results were clear: 92% in favor of the reforms. We posted the results on the community board and had them recorded with the county clerk's office within 24 hours. That night, I sat on my mom's porch watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one, like stars returning to a wounded sky. She brought me a cup of cinnamon tea and sat beside me. You look tired, Mijo. Feels like I've aged 5 years in 2 weeks. But it's better now, she said. They're talking to each other, helping each other. That didn't happen before. It wasn't allowed to happen before. She nodded, then looked out at the street. You think they'll try again? Someone always tries again, I said. But now the neighborhood knows how to push back. And that was the difference. Authority hadn't just changed hands, it had been dismantled and rebuilt by the very people it was supposed to serve. Not with rage. With resolve. 3 weeks after the community ratified the new bylaws, Willow Pines began to look like a neighborhood again, not a gated fiefdom. The lawns were still trimmed, but not obsessively so. Kids rode scooters alongside retirees walking their dogs. No one barked orders. No one left anonymous warnings taped to doors. The fear had evaporated, and something better had taken root: ownership, the real kind. But we weren't out of the woods yet. Restoring order had been one thing. Untangling the financial wreckage Tessa and her cronies left behind was another. The forensic accountant we hired, a no-nonsense woman named Candace with a calculator tattoo on her wrist, had spent 2 weeks combing through HOA bank statements and vendor contracts. She called me one morning while I was reviewing easement rights on a different property across town. I've got bad news and worse news, she said without preamble. You want the bad or the worse first? Give me the worse. They stopped paying the tax assessment on the clubhouse last year. It's technically not zoned as a community facility. It's listed as a private recreational asset, which means it's taxable. And the county is preparing to seize it. And the bad news? They drained the reserve fund to zero. Every last cent. And there's a bounce check for a tree trimming service that never showed up. I pinched the bridge of my nose and leaned back in my chair. How long before the county moves? They've already posted the notice. 30 days left. If we don't pay the back taxes, it goes up for auction. I drove straight to the clubhouse and called an emergency meeting. Within the hour, the new committee sat at the long table again, visibly exhausted but still game. We've got a month, I said. Tessa reclassified the clubhouse under a separate LLC, probably to shield it from liability. But it also made it taxable. She never paid those taxes. We can't lose the clubhouse, Malik said. It's the only communal space we've got. Everything we've built the last few weeks, it started here. Lorna flipped open her laptop. How much is owed? Just under $24,000, I said. Plus a penalty. Bernice folded her hands. We don't have $24, let alone $24,000. I opened the folder I brought. I've got a short-term solution. I'll cover the tax payment as a private loan to the association. No interest. But we need a way to rebuild the reserve fund sustainably. I don't like the idea of you paying out of pocket, Lorna said. It's a risk I'm willing to take, I said. I'll get it back eventually, but we need to move fast. They voted on it unanimously. I wired the funds later that afternoon. The next issue was the vendors. Most of them had been local landscapers, maintenance crews, window cleaners, but many hadn't been paid in months. Some had written off the HOA as a deadbeat client. Others were still sending automated invoices, unaware the old board had been tossed out. I started calling them personally. This is Peter Wallace, I told a gruff-sounding man who answered on the fifth ring. I'm representing the new Willow Pines Oversight Committee. I know we owe you for last year's tree removal service. Can you confirm how much we still owe? You're not with Tessa, are you? He asked. Not even in the same universe. He chuckled. Then I'm listening. We negotiated partial settlements with every vendor willing to talk. And by the end of the week, we'd reduced outstanding liabilities by nearly half. The community agreed to a temporary dues increase not to fatten anyone's pockets, but to keep the lights on and the grounds maintained. This time, every penny was accounted for, and every dollar spent was posted on a public ledger. One afternoon, I stopped by my mom's place. She was sitting on the back patio, trimming basil leaves and humming along to a Spanish ballad playing softly from her Bluetooth speaker. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked grounded. I saw the new paint on the clubhouse, she said as I poured her a glass of lemonade. It looks nice. Brighter. We're going to hold a barbecue next month, I said. Celebrate the reforms. You should come. I'll bring arrows and my folding chairs, she said with a grin. I sat down beside her and watched the breeze ripple through the curtain of leaves overhead. There's something else, I said after a moment. The state attorney general is launching a civil inquiry into HOA abuses statewide. They're using Willow Pines as one of the cornerstone cases. We're not just changing this neighborhood. We might be setting a precedent. She reached over and patted my hand. You always were stubborn. Now look what that did. The barbecue turned out better than any of us expected. Families brought food from every background: roasted corn, jerk chicken, homemade lumpia, cucumber salad with dill. Kids played tag while adults lounged in lawn chairs and talked about things that had nothing to do with violations or fines. Laughter echoed across the park for the first time in what felt like years. Near the end of the event, Bernice took the mic and asked everyone to gather around. We've come a long way, she said. And we've still got work to do. But I want to take a moment to recognize the person who made this possible. She looked in my direction and I shook my head subtly. But she kept going. He didn't just fight back when his mother was wronged. He rebuilt the entire system from the ground up. Not with anger. With integrity. Let's hear it for Peter Wallace. The applause that followed was real. Not polite. Not obligatory. Just sincere. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and the last of the burgers sizzled on the grill, Lorna came up to me, holding her phone. There's someone here to see you, she said. I turned and saw a man in a tailored suit standing at the edge of the lawn. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, with a city planning badge clipped to his belt. Mr. Wallace? He asked. Name's Ethan Duval. I'm with the Office of Community Development. I've been assigned to monitor neighborhoods undergoing governance transition. I've never seen a turnaround this fast. We had motivation, I said. He nodded. We're compiling candidate neighborhoods for a pilot grant. Funds to support transparent HOA restructuring and infrastructure repair. Willow Pines just moved to the top of the list. What kind of funds? Up to $100,000. If the application checks out. I didn't answer right away. I looked around at the kids racing across the grass, at the couples sipping wine out of plastic cups, at my mom holding court with 3 other grandmothers under a canopy. I think we can make a strong case, I said. He handed me a card. You've already made it. The next day, we submitted the paperwork. The grant would allow us to repave the sidewalks, repair the clubhouse roof, and add solar panels to reduce utilities. But more importantly, it would codify what we'd built, proof that communities could rise even after being gutted from the inside. Weeks passed. Fall rolled in with golden leaves and crisp air. The neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. The oversight committee transitioned into an elected board this time with term limits, rotating chairs, and mandatory transparency measures. No one campaigned with glossy flyers or empty promises. They just showed up to the community discussion nights and listened. I returned to my practice full-time, but I stayed on as legal advisor for the board, unpaid. It felt strange at first stepping back, letting others take the lead, but it was the right thing to do. I'd lit the match. Now it was their fire to tend. On a quiet Thursday morning, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a single slip of paper inside. You may have won the neighborhood, but this isn't over. I recognized the handwriting. Tessa. I showed it to the board and filed it away. No need to escalate. Not yet, but I did install a new security camera over my mother's front door, just in case. Still, I wasn't worried, because this time the neighborhood wasn't asleep. It was wide awake and watching. And if anyone tried to seize power again, they'd find themselves facing more than just one angry son. They'd be facing a community that had learned how to fight back and how to win.